Okay, we'll still be letting people into the Zoom with us. There are a bunch of people in the waiting room that we're letting in. But hello, my name is Yoni Pizer. I'm the community liaison for Congressman Mike Quigley. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us on this very snowy, crazy morning. Glad to see everyone is safe at home in the middle of Snowmageddon 2021. It is wonderful to see so many familiar faces. The one good thing about Zoom is, it can increase attendance. And I think if we were to all trying to be downtown this morning, I would venture to say that there would be fewer people joining us. So it's wonderful to see so many faces, and let's hope that next year we can be back at Jenner and Block if they're so wonderful to have us, with Howard and Gail acting as such amazing hosts as usual. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to give a few ground rules before we start off. We have everybody on mute, but we will be having a time for Q&A at the end after we deal with the pre-submitted questions. I just wanted to thank the rest of Congressman Quigley's staff for making this all possible. We have Wani Nahosa, Mike's Chief of Staff. We have Erica Reardon, his District Director, Bridget Hogan, who is my partner in crime with LGBTQ issues, calling in from DC. We've got Adam Winters, who's been my partner here in Chicago, helping us kick this off. Jessica Merritt, Victoria Ohms, who did I miss? Anyway, great staff, and good morning to all. I also wanted to give a shout out to our electeds who are joining us this morning. We have Representative Kelly Cassidy, Representative Lamont Robinson, Representative Margaret Croak. We have Alderman Tom Tunney, Alderman James Kappelman. We have Metropolitan Water and Reclamation District Commissioner Deborah Shore. We've got Kevin Morrison, Cook County Commissioner. And we have representatives from Mayor Lightfoot's office. And it's great to see all of you here this morning. Let's see, this Zoom is being recorded. So if anyone wants to change their screen name or turn off their video, now would be the time to do that. As always, just, everybody be respectful in the chat and elsewhere. We are so fortunate this morning, in addition to having the amazing congressman with us, to have Kim Hunt, who has agreed yet again to be MC for this great event. I'm sure almost all of you know her because everyone knows Kim Hunt. I'm lucky enough to consider her to be a friend, and she is just a treasure for our community. She's executive director of Pride Action Tank, project of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, where she also serves as senior director of policy and advocacy. She is a literal member of the LGBTQ Hall of Fame. That's how great she is. And I've had the pleasure of working with her also at Outspoken, the monthly LGBTQ storytelling project. So without further ado, Kim, take it away.
Wow, thank you, Yoni, for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to have to listen to this recording over and over again just to get my day going. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to read Congressman Quigley's bio just in case, on the off chance there's someone here who doesn't know who Congressman Quigley is and how important he is to Illinois and to the LGBTQ community here in particular. So Mike Quigley was elected to Congress to represent Illinois' 5th district after serving his community for more than 30 years. He previously served as a Cook County Commissioner and began his career through community service in the Lakeview neighborhood. His election to Congress was an opportunity to take his unique style of reform-minded politics from Cook County to Washington. As a member of the House Committee on Appropriations, Representative Quigley is using his position to prioritize investments in innovation and Chicago area infrastructure. He currently serves as the chair of the Committee on Financial Services and General Government, where he is focused on continuing his efforts to protect consumers, promote small business, and protect our financial system from policies that prioritize Wall Street at the expense of working Americans. In 2015, Representative Quigley was appointed by Speaker Nancy Pelosi, I smile every time I say her name, to serve on the influential House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Representing Chicago, one of the nation's largest cities and a major hub for travel and commerce, Quigley brings to the committee a unique understanding of the national security challenges we face and has championed policies that will keep America safe. He is also the co-founder and co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional Transparency Caucus and has introduced landmark legislation that would significantly strengthen oversight at all branches of the federal government and utilizes 21st century technology to expand public access to information. Having established himself as a leader on many of our nation's most challenging and significant issues, Representative Quigley continues to fight for full LGBTQ+ equality as vice chair of the LGBT Equality Caucus, as well as a woman's right to choose and common sense gun law reforms that will make our community safe. As I said, it is great to be here with you, Representative Quigley, and thank you for continuing to offer this LGBTQ+ roundtable. For those who are watching via Zoom, feel free to type in a hello in the chat. That's always nice. We've got lots of questions from the folks who registered, but as Yoni said, we'll try to leave time at the end for folks to ask additional questions. So Congressman Quigley, do you want to make any opening remarks or should we jump right into the questions?
I'll be quick. I want to say thanks. I want to say thanks to you for the wonderful introduction and for all the great work you do the community. And look, this is an all-star team and the panel of people who have served our community so well. So thank you for all, and thank you for all for attending. Yoni, thanks for being back with us. Thanks to all my great staff and all the electeds for the work they do. Look, there's a lot to cover, but you know, for all of us for 4 years, 4+ years, we're saying we have to get past this nightmare. After a while, you sort of thought to yourselves, well, it's going to be okay once we get past this nightmare, this 4 years of hell. But we know better, right? We know that we can't have 4 years on and 4 years off. And, you know, we have a lot of work to do to get this country to appreciate and understand why we can't repeat this and how we have to move forward together. And that is a lot of work. So I'll just say a couple quick things. I can't help having just sat through the inaugural with our new president. I wasn't going to go. I hate having to go through all the crowds, and I've been to inaugurals, and it just wasn't, I was happy and I was going to work with the new president, but I wasn't inclined to make a big effort to go until the 6th. So, I haven't talked about it a lot, but after we escaped from the chambers and were hunkered down waiting for the National Guard so we can have a peaceful transfer of power, I heard the vice president say, let's go back to work. So, for me, it was that night, staying up till 4, having that transfer of power in the democratic way. But I wanted to be at the inaugural more than ever. So I'm not known, I guess, as a particularly sensitive guy on such things. But I got to tell you, standing at the inaugural in the path that the seditionists took to take over the Capitol for the first time since 1814, and 2 weeks later to that moment, to be there when when it worked, when the president took the oath of office and we were hearing the great words of an extraordinary poet and those singing "This Land Is Your Land." I think that, is what we were all looking forward to after these 4 years. And finally, in terms of inaugurals, it also reminded me in his dying days, FDR's inaugural, where he said something that could be given today. We have learned that we can't live alone at peace, that our well-being is dependent on the well-being of others. We have learned that we must live as men, not ostriches, nor as dogs in the manger. We have learned to be citizens of the world, members of the human community. We have learned the simple truth, as Emerson said, that the only way to have a friend is to be one. That's where we are, folks. I know many of you felt the same way I did. We just have to get past this nightmare. But we learned all too well it's more than that this fight's going to go on for the rest of our lives. And to the extent you can play a role, I want to be with you when we do it. And it started off really well, right? The executive orders and the early appointments, Mayor Pete, new Assistant Secretary of Health, Rachel Levin, pretty exciting stuff. Non-discrimination, trans military, changed the ban there overnight. So we're sending messages early on that are all particularly hopeful. So I want to be part of that with all of you as we go forward. I see Tico's on the call. Let me just start with some pretty cool news. We're bringing back earmarks. My last earmark was for the Center on Halsted. We're going to bring back earmarks. And I'm on the Appropriates Committee now, and I'm a chairman on that committee now. So this is going to be a lot more fun. We're going to bring back earmarks that channel probably through state and local, but they'll be targeted so we can go after and try to help our friends in the agencies and entities that need help. And I see my state rep and state senate friends on the call with us. We're going to do a big, big infrastructure bill too. And that has to be for everybody. And so I really want to work with the aldermen, county commissioners, state reps, state senators, and drive the resources we need on an ongoing basis. We're going back next week. We're going to do that big COVID care package. And I'm hoping to get at least $350 billion to state and local governments, again, to prop up all these necessary programs that I see everybody on this call clapping for. So, as aggravating as all this is going to be, we just keep reminding ourselves that the nightmare, the worst of nightmares, is at least over for a while. And we're going to show what hope and love can do for our world. Let's fire away.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman, for those words and that reminder that we have to keep fighting. And we're going to do that. So a little palate cleanser for us to get started. First question is it true that you've marched in every Pride parade? I'm assuming this person meant in Chicago. And tell us how you became involved in the first one.
I was working for Alderman Hanson, and I got to know all my friends working for the Business Association on Halsted at the time. You remember Dewey Harrington and all our other folks, and they were organizing for the parade. You remember Dewey used to ride around on a little scooter at the parade. So it was 1983, and it was the first parade I marched in, and I had such a great time. And as you recall, it wasn't quite so corporate, quite so massive at the time, and it was unusual when you saw electeds. So, it's become commonplace, which is at least some sign of it. So the bottom line is, last year was the first year that we didn't have a parade and we didn't march, but I'm hoping some way, somehow we can do something this year to keep the tradition together. But be proud to walk with all of you, hopefully this June.
So Congressman, State Rep Kelly, it seems to be indicating that you aren't giving us the full story here. There's something about a coconut bra and a hula skirt.
Well, there were people with a particular sense of humor that were different casting, deciding on what I should wear each year. Apparently, what was the song? I'm just a guy that can't say no. So I wore what I was given. And I'm not sure if she burned the negatives, which shows you how long ago this was.
Apparently the negatives are still in her possession. Next question is, how do you think the new administration and Democratic control of the Senate will change the overall treatment of the LGBTQ community?
Well, I think on any issue you ask me about, the fact that we won the House back and the fact that the Senate is now tied means they can't continue the horrific path unabated that they had. Having said that, Senator Durbin has a great expression. Great victories require great margins. When we passed the healthcare law, we had 60 Democrats in the Senate. But that's not to say that we can't do some amazing things. It's just going to be tougher than we had hoped. For me, first up besides HR 1 is the Equality Act. We passed it before, we're going to pass it again. We'd like to think that some of these strides that we need to make can happen with enough bipartisan support. Right? We saw 7 Republicans vote to impeach the president. There ought to be more than 10 that think that equality should be the law of the land. So we're going to give it every effort. I don't know how a lot of these bills are going to roll out in the time. Transition was unnecessarily awful, balked by the previous administration, who obviously didn't accept their crushing loss. But I think that is slowing some things. Impeachment only slowed things for a short period of time. So, and of course, we're dealing with a once in a century pandemic and the economic downturn that comes with it. So those are all priorities that we all care about. In the meantime, I think we begin to pile up those victories in the House and move toward the Senate, where Mitch McConnell had blocked them for so long. So, and pick an issue you care about. I've already mentioned some of the things the president has done in terms to help the community and equality. There's 100 executive orders this president can reverse on climate change. It's just one example of a lot of horrible things that took place the last 4 years that just having the White House is going to change. Obviously, the appointments are there too.
So much to do, so much to do. This next question is related to the Equality Act and that timing that you just mentioned. Will the Equality Act be passed by Congress and signed into law within the first 100 days of the administration? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it'll pass in the first 100 days in the House. I know, Speaker Pelosi hasn't announced the schedule and how she wants to roll it out. They're always very careful of how timing and sequence works when we have enough votes to win in the Senate at times. So I'm a little rusty on that because we've been a while without having the ability to pass legislation out of the Senate. And anyone who can predict the Senate is way ahead of me. So I know it's a priority. I know it'll pass the House. I know the president is anxious to sign things, and certainly this into law. I just can't say how this choke point, which will be the Senate, will impair that opportunity.
Thank you. President Biden has proposed an immigration reform bill. Are you aware of any provisions in the bill that would help LGBTQ refugees or those seeking asylum?
We had a comprehensive immigration bill that passed out of the Senate probably 7 years ago now, came to the House. Boehner wouldn't put it on the floor. Ryan wouldn't put it on the floor. And I think you're going to see it take place this time. I don't know what the final product will be, but I am certain that that will be the priority of the administration, and certainly on the House side. If my staff wants to pipe up, if there's anything particular already in the bill that we're aware of.
Yeah, so the proposal that was sent over from the White House did indicate, like, loosely that they are going to prioritize this. They haven't, spelled out the details specifically on how they're going to be more accommodating, but they did mention they want to be. And I think also recently in President Biden's speech, I think it was on foreign policy, he mentioned that he wants to take some executive orders on this and make sure that it's a priority on that front. So it's definitely top of mind. And while the immigration plan that he proposed in terms of sending it to Congress was robust, he definitely is also looking at administrative action that he can take as well.
Beautiful. This next question comes from Cook County Commissioner Kevin Morrison. One of the biggest issues facing our democracy is widespread disinformation. Many websites, television shows, YouTube channels, etc., work as if they are news, but push out conspiracy. Are there conversations on how this pressing issue can be addressed?
Absolutely. And it is going to be a fascinating debate for those. You heard the president talk about sections of the law that dealt with this and what he wanted to do. I don't think it'll be as dramatic and sweeping as some want, but it is absolutely going to be there. And I think you'll also see Congress on a bipartisan, bicameral basis move to pressure our social media platforms to again be more protective. We've had some victories there. When you compare what took place in 2016 during the election, for example, to this time, you saw some victories. You saw some changes and some efforts, with entities like Parler and those who put them on their platforms, entities like that. So it's going to be a fascinating debate. I am convinced that we are going to pass something, that there's a lot of interest on this, on a bipartisan, bicameral basis. The administration talked about it during the campaign, and they're starting to talk about it to us now. So we're rip-roaring ready to go. I serve on the Intel committee. I think you couple the concerns with that as they dovetail. We probably spend 50 times more on security issues relating to foreign threats as we do domestic. So I think at the same time we address the issue that you ask, we're going to be focusing so much more of our efforts on providing domestic security. The insurrection of January 6th, my friends, was not an isolated incident. It is sadly a trend, and the avenues for communicating on that are just one element of what we're going to have to protect against.
Wow, thank you for that. The reversal of the transgender ban in the U.S. military service suggests that the LGBTQ community may have a 4-year reprieve on attacks from the executive branch. That said, how can the federal government, including the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, help protect the LGBTQ plus community at the local level, where most decisions are local and majority, or at least the loudest or most violent, rule? That comes from one of our folks who registered today.
I was proud to be the sponsor of legislation at the county. The first time we passed any legislation protecting gender identity. It is something that's extremely important to me. When we talk about priorities, and something we have talked about at the last two of these breakfasts when we were in person, the trans community has often been left behind, and that can't happen anymore. That's why I was so proud that the administration took that stance right out of the box to show that wasn't going to be the case. For those who are willing to serve our country, they deserve our respect, our appreciation, and not this blatant discrimination that takes place. Some of this is messaging. When we repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it was messaging that was done so brilliantly across the country, reminding people that those who are willing to fight and die to protect us ought to be protected as well. It's a question of simple justice. And I do think we have to start passing more legislation at the state, local, and national level to building these protections for good. So I'm excited. I can't wait to work with the community. I guess the most important thing is educating the American people and helping to change the hearts and minds of those who have yet to understand the significance.
Thank you for that. We've got a few more questions from folks who registered. So I want to remind folks, you can put questions in the chat if you want. And also we'll open, I think we'll open a mic or two for folks to ask questions. There are a lot of you on this call, so we'll see how that goes. You and some Chicago LGBTQ leaders, some of whom are on this call, met with Secretary Ben Carson to try to get him to treat trans Americans fairly. What was that like? And did you think you could get him to change the administration's policy?
You know, as a Cub fan who waited, most of my life for them to win the first championship in over a century, I am an optimistic person. So I think you had to be more optimistic that Secretary Carson would change his heart. So yeah, it was great. We organized the meeting with leaders in the community, and you like to believe that there's hope that anybody's heart can turn, but not his. So the night of the election, I was thinking of him as the election results were coming in, and I was humming "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead." So it was frustrating. I guess the bottom line for those who were with me that day, I think all of us left with some hope, and it's as if the next day he had forgotten the meeting altogether. And the good news is in all this, and we move forward, one of my colleagues is going to take his place, and it will be such a contrast. And I'm second ranking on the subcommittee that funds housing, transportation, housing, urban development. So you got to do two things. You got to authorize change and you got to fund it. And for housing and those who need it, for all the issues that this panel knows as well as anybody in the country, you need money and you need resources. And the state needs it, and the city and the county need it. All our little municipalities around us need it as well. This week, the last few weeks have been an example of just, how stark it is when there is no shelter. So I want to have a meeting with my current colleague soon. I don't know when confirmations are going to take place for all of these, but the new housing director will be outstanding. So again, night and day, appropriations, night and day. It's gonna be a lot of work, but the meetings will be fun, and we won't have to cross our fingers leaving the room that our housing secretary isn't alternating Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, and I just do want to add too that
mostly Mr. Hyde.
I do just want to add as well that as the congressman mentioned, we don't have a confirmed secretary yet. obviously she's been appointed and we have a good relationship with her, but that hasn't stopped the agency from getting to work already. They've already issued a memorandum saying that the Fair Housing Act includes housing discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. So they're not necessarily even waiting for her to get into her spot. They're already taking action, doing what they can. And that was really positive. And I think it shows too that we still have a really good working relationship with that office, because they reached out to us when it was actually still embargoed, and just wanted to make sure that we're aware because of all the work that the congressman has done. So, you know, I think we do have some of the staff are starting to get in place that we are friends with and do have those connections. And I think it shows that they're hitting the ground running, and we have those relationships there to continue the good work and work hand in glove with them.
You know, and something else for all of you and all your issues that's incredibly important. We had a hard time getting information, data, right? We were dealing with an administration that was opaque, but also hated science, right? Disavowed it, didn't like facts, and they didn't care about administering. So we were flying blind on so many of the issues that you care about. We now and will have friends that we can go to get reliable information about the status of anything that you're working on. And don't hesitate to call us to help make those connections.
Wow, what a difference an election makes. And you are a true friend and fan to bring in that Cubs reference there. Amazing.
My Hawks only took 50 years.
So the next question is, though the filibuster is not really a factor in the House, what is your opinion on invoking the nuclear option to kill the filibuster in the Senate?
Look, I wish I had a vote there too, but so there's this dynamic that we're all too familiar with, that if we do end the filibuster for all time, we can only imagine the horrible things that the Republicans would do, you know, when they have control of the Senate. But that being said, there's already over 100 bills at the local level to suppress voting, right? That which HR 1 is so critical to pass. And at some point in time, you say, all right, if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. And the erosion that'll take place at the local level with Republicans in control of so many general assemblies will be devastating. So at some point in time, you say, well, we have to count on the American people to understand what the differences are versus a Republican Party at civil war with itself. And so at this point in time, I would be ready to go. But again, I'll be a spectator like you on that one.
What impact does the civil war within the Republican Party potentially have on moving legislation?
You know, I mean, there's a couple things there. I know what people think, oh, to hell with the Republican Party, you know, let's just move forward. But the country needs a healthy Republican Party, not one with a cancer within it, right? Whatever you want to call Trumpism. You know, gone are the days when we can remember Republicans who were helpful and tried to help pass civil rights legislation. So, you know, I long for that Republican Party, and for those with a human heart. There were many that I can still work with right now to get something done. And the fact is, we've almost always got a divided government. So we better hope that there are Republicans out there that we can work with. The concern I have with the Civil War, among other things, is, think about it this way. It was only a handful who showed moral courage and voted for impeachment, right? And those that voted to certify the election, and they're already being censored. If those folks get voted out in primaries, which tend to skew far, far, far right, that party will be left as just a hollow shell of its former self. and they'll be even worse. You know, what role will moderates in the Republican Party play to keep our country from going way to the right and just having an extreme far right or a Democratic Party? It makes it a lot tougher to compromise. And I'll be honest, I'm doing an event Friday about bipartisanship. I'll tell you, it's a lot harder to work with folks who voted against impeachment, right? It's hard to. When we came back on the 6th to vote, and there were still Republicans going forward challenging a lawful election, I got to tell you the truth, it's hard to respect them. It's hard to work with them. But you know, if you can get one good vote out of them and do something good, you at least have to try.
Yeah. Well, this is a related question. What legislative action can you take to ensure that the Republican-stacked Supreme Court does not curtail the right to same-sex marriage?
Well, look, it would be unusual for the Supreme Court to flip so dramatically so soon. They got to find a plaintiff at this point in time that somehow shows that they've been damaged by this, which is, again, hard to imagine. We need to control the Senate. We need to control the White House. We need to put good judges in place that move up and become appellate court justices and Supreme Court justices. You know, we can pass a lot of legislation. We're not gonna add to the Supreme Court beyond its numbers. We're still dependent upon the control of the White House and the Senate to avoid them doing what they're doing. And at this point in time, you know, it's a fairly independent Supreme Court. They don't act in a vacuum, and sometimes every once in a while they take a moral vote that will surprise you, as our Chief Justice does occasionally. So that's what we have to count on.
All right, I've got one more question from the folks who registered, and then I'm going to move to the chat. This last question is, when will Puerto Rico and DC statehood be introduced, before or after the Voting Rights Act?
Again, I think that the speaker has been very busy with everything else, hasn't talked about that. I think these would be great measures. I do believe that they're going to go forward, but they haven't talked about that. I think what you're going to see is we're going to go back next week and we're going to pass the CARES Act. Then HR1 is HR1 for a reason, and then I think things unfold from that. So they will also be, their success will also depend entirely on how we handle the issue of the filibuster, because they're not going to pass either one of those, DC or Puerto Rican statehood, unless that changes at the same time. So do you do it all at once, have 52 straight states, and those states will probably bring us Democratic senators, you know? So I think there's no answer to your question right now, because those are big, okay, how are we going to handle this? Are we going after the filibuster? And that's going to dictate how we move forward on all the big legislation. If you're going to blow it up, you know, if you're going to do it, go big.
And I think too, just on this straight introduction point, the Voting Rights Act and the Equality Act have been introduced, and so has DC statehood. So definitely in terms of procedure, it's out there, but as the Congressman was saying, you know, we're still laying out the agenda in terms of how things proceed forward, and we have not gotten a ton of indication just yet on how things are going to roll out. There is a lot of mounting pressure on the administration to respond to this and kind of give some indication of where they're at, because they have not come out on this specific issue yet, understanding again that we've got a lot of issues in front of us. But did just want to, in terms of procedurally, kind of counter that with what everything the Congressman just said.
Thank you, Bridget. That's helpful. You touched on this a little bit, Congressman, but this next question is, what do we do with the rising tide of conspiracy theorists being elected?
We had hearings on this already on the Intelligence Committee. It is extraordinary. Adam's Schiff has talked about civics education quite a bit, and I think that's part of this. I think it's part of this is just pushing back in the same way we do so effectively to change the hearts and minds of stuff. You'd like to think that those folks have seen that nothing that they have been told has taken place, right? But it's going to take a wide variety of working with, again, the social media platforms to suppress the worst of it and educate as we use forward, use the existing institutions we have right now to try to help educate folks. So, boy, there's a much, much, much longer answer to this, but it's going to take a concerted effort on a wide variety of fronts, including the press and how people get their information. I don't think, the first time this really struck me as something that could happen, that something that's untrue could really impact things was Senator Kerry running for president and the Swift boat thing. And I think they took that for granted that no one could possibly believe that. I think that some of us felt that as well. But I remember getting reports back from the Florida numbers that there were a lot of people and Democrats in Florida who believed a lot of the crazy conspiracy theories. And you had to play in the same field that the conspiracy theorists are and beat them back at the ground level. It's going to take a tremendous amount of work.
Whew. All right, this next question is, what is going on at the census and how can we speed things up? With redistricting this year, this is concerning. The last announcement was that data would be released in September, and that is the same time we began petition in Illinois.
No, I understand. We're trying to overcome the damage of the Trump administration. They blamed COVID in entirety, but the fact is they tried to sabotage and change how we do the census in every stretch of the imagination. So we are still working to make sure that there are any other resources or efforts we can make to move that forward. So we are trying, but I'm afraid that we're suffering, and I don't want to blame COVID entirely. I do think a lot of the blame rests with the Trump administration, who are attempting to tank this, as they're tanking the Postal Service too.
All right, this next question comes from Ed Yannicka at ACLU. Congressman, would you consider urging the Equality Caucus to weigh in with a letter of support for the Biden-Harris administration for an executive order that eases the process for changing the gender marker on federal documents?
Sure. Look, I think some of this will come from an ongoing dialogue with the caucus and the Biden administration, which is obviously going to be a lot easier now. But I can't tell you how receptive they seem to be. So, glad to work with the caucus and all of you toward the ends.
Okay, this next one is from Bennett Lawson and is also related to redistricting. How do you think the Illinois map will look? Who will be losing? How can the LGBT voice be heard?
Sure, a couple things here. Illinois will probably lose a congressional seat. If you look at the sheer numbers now, just the data we use now, of course it's dated, but the updated information, the latest stuff we have, it's probably going to be a seat lost in the rural area. So our districts will have to get a little bit bigger in size and number, that is, and then it will be interesting. Obviously, the General Assembly makes those decisions, and it will be all the same questions we have now, right? What's fair? What's just? Are there enough votes to create a second Hispanic district? right? How do we make sure we still represent these districts in a fair way so that every person and entity group is equally represented? So we need the data, but I think we have to have our principles set out ahead of time and protect the issue that you're talking about as well. So we'll be encouraging. I know we're going to get a lot of help from groups that are involved in this. And I think another ingredient in that is, Jan Schakowsky and I changed our districts pretty dramatically in a manner that helped at the time Congressman Tammy Duckworth, Bill Foster, Brad Schneider. Now we got to be concerned about districts for Caston, Underwood, Bustos. Those seats were difficult too. So, protecting the voice of the LGBTQ community is absolutely critical, but being fair and just for all while addressing the political concerns that are there while losing a seat, it's a tough challenge. And it's going to be almost impossible to do in the short frame of mind if we don't have a little bit more information beforehand and at least the principles determined by the General Assembly before it starts. If we lose the second seat, then it gets really, 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 really ugly.
Oof. All right, next question. Appreciating the need for the COVID relief bill, what can be done to rein in the debt and get back to balanced budgets, paying down debt in the near term? Won't earmarks create potential for additional pork? Our national financial well-being seems a bit precarious given debt at the national and state levels.
Sure. It is interesting that some of the Trump members are talking about that first. It's not that it shouldn't be talked about. They're talking about it first now, and they didn't do that when Trump was president. If you ask the current Fed chief, Trump's Fed chief, any living former Fed chief or former cabinet level person involved with finance at all, they're all saying the same thing. Now is not the time to rein in the care package. This economy is still in peril and could crater if we don't have economic aid propping it up. You see the precarious situation that state and local governments are in, but we also recognize that there are a lot of people who simply can't, their industries are gone, right? So, and many more are in peril. So I think what you've got to do is get the economy humming again. You got to repeal the horrible tax bill that was passed under the Trump administration. That cut 1.5 trillion out of revenue with about a 1% growth factor over 10 years. So it is a combination of things that help grow our economy, which allows us to deal with debt and deficit. I'll say this, about 9 years ago, we had Simpson Bowles, and there were very few members of the House who supported that. I was one of them. I do think you can be financially responsible at the same time you care for all those.
And I think too, one thing I'll add is what we've heard is, right now the focus is on making sure the spending is there. I think that we want to make sure that when we say that and all that kind of stuff, people realize that we understand, obviously, there's still something we need to do and to address this, obviously. And obviously the congressman has showed longstanding that he is someone who supports that fiscal responsibility. But I think right now you're hearing a lot about continuing to spend because that is what we need to be doing right now. And it's not the time just yet anyways, in the belief of our party right now to pull back.
Congressman, I know you have a hearing at 10, so I just have one final question for you. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that when the election results were announced, I took a deep breath and felt like I was breathing for the first time in 4 years. Given that we have an administration that has demonstrated its care and concern for the LGBTQ community and that we even exist, What are your thoughts on how we keep the pressure on to make sure that we keep advancing our rights as a community and for all of those who are marginalized within this LGBTQ community?
Yeah, it's the constant flow of communication. I think the fact that the administration continues to appoint LGBTQ people to vital spots, and it can't just be, it's great that they're at the cabinet level, but all those other spots as well, including regional administrators and maybe US EPA regional administrators. Those are all great examples. But nationally, the continued education, changing the hearts and minds of folks, as I began the conversation with, it's just absolutely so important. And I do think thanking and rewarding those who do the right thing is important, regardless of their party. It really does make a difference. So, you know, keep hustling, keep doing the things that you're doing. I think we survived these 4 years, because you kept caring for each other, right? Not only did that help everybody, but I think it was the best therapy for any of us, right? For me, I felt if I had to watch the last 4 years and I couldn't do anything about it, it would have been brutal. But being on the first impeachment investigation team and educating the American people, people say, hey, didn't you know you were racing to a stop sign on impeachment 1 or 2? Sure, but accountability is important. And I also think all these elections are decided, as you can see, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, really close votes. I think it played a role in educating those people in the middle, those swing voters who wanted to change the administration. So it was worth it. Bottom line, we got through this because you all care for each other.
Thank you so much, Congressman Quigley. We need to give you a few minutes of what I call humanity time between meetings. So thank you again for hosting this roundtable and coming to our community to keep us updated on what's going on and hear from us as well. So we'll show you some love silently via the internet. And thank you again for asking me to moderate the questions. Really appreciate it. It's such an honor.
Thank you for moderating. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks, everyone.
Be safe.
Congressman.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Congressman.
Be careful out there.
Thanks.
Help it.
Well,
I'm wearing gym shoes now on the house floor so I can move.
Thanks for saving the world.
Thank you. See you, folks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
You have to get those pictures from Kelly.